Okay, it's 6 o'clock, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you to all of you who are here live. We are recording this session so that you'll have a copy of it later. And for those who weren't able to join us tonight, you'll get a recording. I will also share my slides back with Stilly Valley, so they'll be sending out a copy of those slides as well. My name is Megan Ellison. I'm a registered dietitian nutritionist and also a certified diabetes care and education specialist. So that's what these little acronyms down here, these things after my name indicate. And thank you so much for being here this evening. I know we had scheduled for earlier in the day and we had some technical difficulties. So it is February 2026. We are celebrating Heart Month. And I'm hoping that some of this information that we talk through tonight will be helpful for your hearts and your family's hearts. So yeah, hoping that you are all taking good care of yourselves, especially this month. So let's take a moment to just thank Stilly Valley Health Connections. They are the sponsor for the class tonight. And that is the organization that you interacted with for registration. And Stilly Valley does a lot in the community. So I would definitely check out their webpage for other classes. We'll talk about some of those at the end of our discussion tonight. And things beyond nutrition classes. So check out stillyvalley.org. All right, our topic for this evening, cardiovascular disease. What is it and why does it matter? We're going to talk through some blood pressure guidelines and interventions, specifically the things that you can really do. We're not going to get into, medications, but what can you do behaviorally with diet, exercise, those kinds of things. How all of those little changes can add up to equal big outcomes. And then taking a big picture perspective while still thinking about your day-to-day goals. And maybe if you have a piece of paper and pencil, hopefully you do, you can jot some notes down, things you're thinking about, things you're feeling motivated towards, and then at the end, set a couple goals for yourself. And then I'll give you some resources as well. Feel free to put things in the chat or the Q&A. I'll check those occasionally. I can't see or hear you, but I can look at your comments. All righty, cardiovascular disease. This is an umbrella term for all these different conditions, but basically cardio, so associated with the heart, and vascular, associated with all the vessels. You may have heard of some of these specific conditions like coronary heart disease, which is really about the heart, just kind of what it sounds like, and the blood vessels around the heart. Cerebrovascular would be more associated with the brain and the blood vessels supplying that, blood and all those nutrients and oxygenation to the brain. Peripheral artery disease, that is just like it sounds, it's in the periphery, so that would be your arms and legs. Rheumatic heart disease, we don't have much of this anymore in the United States because we have the amazing science of antibiotics. But in other parts of the world, this is still an issue where kiddos, typically young kiddos, can get this bacterial infection, and the rheumatic fever that results from that can actually cause damage to the heart, lifelong damage. And then, of course, we have some congenital heart diseases, defects that would, cause some malformations or some issues with like valves, for example. And then deep vein thrombosis is under the CVD umbrella as well, and things like pulmonary embolism. So those are just some of the kind of big topics, big disease states within CVD. We're not going to get into any more detail than that. We're going to talk mostly about what can you do to prevent it in the first place. But it is a big deal. And, the reason that we do these classes, these heart health classes on a regular basis, like especially yearly, the month of February, is because it is the leading cause of death, not just for us here in the United States, but globally. And so, all of us really should be thinking about our heart health. Um, these are stats back from 2019, but basically almost 18 million people died from cardiovascular diseases. And a lot of those were the result of heart attack and stroke. So we're really trying to prevent heart attack and stroke. Although I will say nowadays, at least in the United States, our survival rate for heart attack and stroke are much higher than they used to be. Okay, and we do know that prevention is key, but if you have had an event like a heart attack or stroke, there are things that you can do, the same things we're going to talk about tonight, in addition to, the medications that your doctor probably has you on. But all of these things really do help, not just with primary prevention, so primary prevention of a heart attack or stroke, but also secondary prevention if you've already had an incident. Okay. Here are our new blood pressure guidelines. We have, over time, the recommendations have become a little bit more tighter. So we know that tighter control does result in better outcomes long term. And so this may be a little bit different than what you remember from the past, but a normal blood pressure, we're looking at 120/80 millimeters of mercury. And then for the elevated category, so they've kind of, delineated this a little bit more. Elevated is a systolic. So that first number is when your heart is pumping, that's systolic. And the second number is when your heart is relaxing, or the diastolic, so like dilation. So, the squeeze and the relaxation numbers. And elevated would be somewhere in that 120 to 129 range for the systolic, or above. And diastolic. Oh yeah, so this is an and. So this is interesting. With elevated, they want both of these ranges. It's not an either or, it's an and. So 120 to 129 and a diastolic less than 80. Whereas when we start getting into stage 1 hypertension or stage 2 hypertension, the statement is or. So if you have either one of these, you could be classified in this stage 1 or stage 2. So stage 1 is 130 to 139 systolic, or diastolic 80 to 89. Stage 2, systolic at least 140 or above, or diastolic of at least 90. So some of you may have bumped up into one of those higher stages because of that or caveat. And we're just taking it much more seriously now than we used to in the past. Partly because it is this silent thing. We call it a silent killer. Oftentimes people don't feel any different. So it kind of sneaks up on you. So it's important that you are getting your annual checks with your primary care doc. You can do your at-home checks. You can do checks at some pharmacies. Wherever you are getting it checked, it's nice to have that as a record and a trend over time to see what's happening. And if you do start noticing that it's elevating, you can get in to see your doctor a little sooner. Or if you're on medication already for blood pressure, you can be monitoring to see, is it going high, or sometimes is it going low? So as a caveat to all the things we're about to talk about that you can be doing to lower your blood pressure and your heart disease risk, a lot of times when my patients start making changes, they need less medications. So it is possible for your blood pressure to all of a sudden start going low because maybe you've changed your diet. Maybe you are eating more fruits and vegetables and fiber. Maybe you've lost a little weight. Maybe you start exercising a little bit more. Maybe you work on your sleep hygiene and your stress management, and all of a sudden it can be a perfect storm for having better blood pressure, but for having maybe too low if you're on a medication. So that is, something to be on the lookout for as you start making some of these changes. And we do know that with hypertension, usually it's not just by itself, right? There's usually comorbidities or other disease states that are happening at the same time. More than 50% of people with hypertension or with high blood pressure have additional cardiovascular risk factors like diabetes, lipid disorders like high LDL, or high triglycerides, overweight or obesity, hyperuricemia, basically high uric acid in your blood, metabolic syndrome, and then other lifestyle factors like maybe smoking or high alcohol intake or a sedentary lifestyle. So for the majority of people, there's not just one thing going on. But the good news is, like from a diet, exercise, lifestyle perspective, those things are going to help you all of these conditions, which is great. And we also do know that the presence of one or more additional of those risk factors we just looked at does increase the risk, proportionately increase the risk of coronary, cerebrovascular, and renal diseases. So basically heart, brain, and kidneys. Okay. So these are the things we're going to dive into: weight management, physical activity, DASH diet, and an alternative to that, sodium intake, alcohol intake. There's other things here, like in the little picture here, the sleeping. If you have not had your sleep assessed and you think there's something going on sleep disturbance wise, do not walk, run to your nearest sleep specialist. Please get it evaluated. It's a huge piece of the puzzle for so many of my patients, and people put it off and wait way too long. And it's affecting all these other things. It's affecting weight management and blood sugar control and blood pressure and cholesterol and your risk of a heart attack and stroke. So yeah, don't ignore sleep. All right, so weight management wise, we did a whole class on this back in January, and Stilly Valley does have the recording of that. I would highly recommend going back to that webinar, reevaluating and like getting the handouts, the slides. I did that webinar, so it's I'm not going to go through it again tonight because it's not our topic. But I do think there's a lot of good information in there. So just know that metabolism is really complex. There's a lot going on there, but we do know that you can do behaviors that result in the outcome of weight loss. And usually they're healthy behaviors. It's things like having a more balanced diet, having higher fiber intake, watching portions, physical activity, it's not just, the calories in, calories out like we used to be told. It's a lot more complex than that. And it also includes the behavioral aspect of making changes. So I would highly recommend going back to that webinar. But we do see the best outcomes for people who are engaged in frequent check-ins. So it's not just like, a one-time class, you're also meeting with others who have similar goals, or you're meeting with your dietitian, or you're part of a support group. And specifically for blood pressure control, we do know that a little bit of weight loss does lower blood pressure. And you can see the amounts down here. We're going to add up all these amounts when we get to the end with all these little changes you can be making. And this is for actually small amounts of weight loss, so like 5 to 10 kilograms. Okay. Physical activity guidelines for Americans. So most of you probably have seen this, but it is worth mentioning again. The number one recommendation is avoid inactivity. And the research that is coming out now on how small impacts really affect your heart health, your overall like morbidity, like your overall disease burden, and mortality, so death rates. What we're seeing just over and over, it's been very interesting the last couple of years, watching the research come out on these like exercise snacks and like how small dose of exercise can have a huge impact, like literally like 1 to 2 minutes of movement versus 0. Somewhere in that like first 5 minutes, you get so much bang for your buck that there really is no reason to not do that 5 minutes. But for a lot of my patients, it's a mindset thing, right? Like we get in this mindset of, oh, we've got to do a lot for it to count. or I've got to do a certain amount of time, or I've got to do a certain amount of intensity. And that is just not what the research is showing. Um, every little bit adds up. Every minute or half minute counts. Of course, we do have these goals of the 150 minutes of moderate intensity aerobic activity each week. And partly because of, where that curve is at, like where do we get the best lowering of disease and death with the amount of time, and the amount of time where we see that curve in the analysis of the research is around 150 minutes. Moderate intensity is an intensity where you are able to have a conversation, but you're not able to sing. So you're working, your heart rate is up, you're probably sweating a little bit, but you can still talk. Whereas vigorous intensity is like you cannot have a conversation. You are just focused on breathing for your exercise. So if you don't have as much time, you can do a higher intensity and basically get the same results with less time. So if you don't have an exercise routine right now, like a cardiovascular exercise routine, these would be good goals to start shooting for as far as a time frame. But again, just know like even the 1 to 2 minutes is going to do something versus nothing. If you break this up, the 150 minutes, that's about 20 minutes a day for 7 days a week. Or if you want to do like 5 days a week, like kind of like a work week structure, maybe 30 minutes a day. Or if you're a weekend warrior, and you're going out for a long hike on the weekend, it's, the 150 minutes all at one time. Or you could break it up into classes, like 3 50-minute classes. But however you want to break it up, think about what you're doing right now and compare your current amount of minutes and intensity to this guideline and see where you can maybe adjust some things. If you are already doing the 150 minutes, gold star to you. Kudos. If I had you in person, I'd give you a high five, give you a gold star for the day, and just say keep doing that because that is really huge for your health. Resistance exercises. So the recommendation is at least twice a week, but we do see benefits with a third time. So if you can think about some form of resisting either your body weight or resisting a band or resisting, a machine or actual weights like dumbbells, anything that has resistance where you're putting some strain on muscles, which actually also puts strain on ligaments and bone, is going to help strengthen. So anytime we have resistance on those parts of the body, nutrients will be sent to those areas to be strengthened. So it's not just your muscles that you're working on with the resistance exercise, it's also your bones. And for, especially for postmenopausal women, like that is really, really huge. And as we get older, bone density matters so much for our, long-term trajectory of how the quality of our life and our, not just our lifespan, but our health span is how that's going to look. Because we definitely don't want to be breaking a hip or having an injury that sets us back. So think about your resistance exercises now twice weekly. It doesn't have to be a lot. And for some of my patients, we actually talk about breaking this up into smaller chunks. So instead of like, kind of bouts of resistance exercises twice a week, like a daily amount, like maybe you do your 10 squats while your coffee is brewing in the morning, or I'll do my squats and calf raises while I'm brushing my teeth in the morning at night. There's 2 minutes, both places. That's basically a half an hour a week of squats I wouldn't have done otherwise. So you can sometimes like habit stack these little things into your life and take something that you already do on a regular basis. You don't have to think about it, and you just add an active activity on top of it. Think about your stretching as well. So if you don't have stretching as a part of your routine, we do see in the research that stretching is not just for mobility and flexibility. It actually does do some strengthening as well. So, we did used to think about it that way, but it makes sense. And, when you think about how with stretching, you are putting some strain in that area, whether it's your legs or, whatever you're stretching, we do see that the body sends more nutrients there, and the stretching itself can even help with muscle and bone and ligament strength. So don't discount that. And then also, we do tend to lose our range of motion over time. We get a little stiffer with time. So it's really good to just keep up on the stretching mode, not just the cardio and the strength, so that you're maintaining some of that flexibility too. And we do see that by following the guidelines for physical activity guidelines for Americans, we can have, on average, it's about a 4 to 9 millimeter of mercury reduction. And typically this is talking about it's usually the systolic. Okay. Let's get into the dietary side of things. So you may have heard of DASH diet. It is a dietary program that was developed specifically with blood pressure in mind. And it is this acronym, Dietary Approaches to Stop Hypertension. Basically, it is a plant-focused diet, not exclusive, but lots and lots of plants. It's a plant-forward approach. And so, the things that most Americans are not getting, like we are not getting enough fiber. We know that, right? But it's not just the fiber that comes in plants. So, FYI, fiber is only found in plants. I just read an article this morning on a research survey where they researched a bunch of Americans to ask where their fiber came from. And many people said seafood and dairy and protein, like animal protein. Not true. So fiber is only found in plants. It is the plant structure. So when we say that Americans eat like low fiber, less than 10% of Americans are eating the recommended amounts of fiber. What we're really saying is we're eating not enough plants. And that matters because it's not just the fiber that's in there, right? It's the fiber, it's the color. So all those phytonutrients that we now know also feed our good gut bugs, feed our gut microbiome, help with anti-inflammation. Many of them have high antioxidants in them. And then there's also other vitamins and minerals. There's potassium, there's magnesium. A lot of things that we tend to be low in are because we're eating a low plant diet on average, right? Maybe you specifically are eating high plant. So high five for that. So we want to be thinking about how do we fit in fruits and vegetables, a color at every eating instance. Like if you don't have something that is not brown at breakfast in America, it's oftentimes very brown or very like beige colored. Add some color, add some berries, have a fruit on the side. Maybe you even scramble in vegetables, like in an egg scramble, where you can saute some veggies or use leftover veggies from the night before. Throw those in there, get a color into each of your meals, but also snacks. So like instead of just like crackers and cheese, it's crackers and cheese and apple slices. Or, it's hummus and carrots and some pita chips. Round it out with some fruits or veggies. And then the DASH diet does have an emphasis on whole grains instead of refined grains. So what we're talking about, an easy way to think about this is, when you go to the grocery store and you see the brown rice that looks kind of fibrous, that's because it is. It's got still the bran on the outside of that brown rice versus the stripped white rice that has been stripped of the bran, which means it's been stripped not just of that fiber and color, those phytonutrients, but also of B vitamins. Some protein is lost. They also take out the germ where the heart healthy fats are at in that grain. So overall, nutritionally, it's not just the fiber you're missing, it's actually a lot of nutrients that you're missing. So, even just little swaps like that, swapping your white rice to a black rice or a red rice or to a different whole grain like a quinoa, for example, or a barley or an oatmeal. There's so many options. So I would, take a glance at your pantry and just, scan down the pantry and see how many of the things in there are actually whole. Are they whole foods? If they're in a box or a bag, they're probably not actually whole foods. They might have been made with whole grains, which is better than made from refined. But if we can, just shift you along that path from like ultra processed to made with whole grains to the actual whole grain, just start along that journey, and exploring some other options. A lot of times you can just stand in the grocery store, look at the back, compare the nutrition facts labels, just pick the one with the higher fiber. That's an easy way to identify, like, is this more whole grain or less whole grain? The one with the higher fiber is most likely going to be higher whole grain. You can also look for the little whole grain symbol on the front of the package, the little yellow symbol that says whole grains. That's a good indicator. And then if you look at the ingredient list, ideally the first thing listed in that ingredient list is the whole grain. It's like whole wheat, not enriched, refined, right? It's whole, or it's oatmeal straight up, or it's, barley straight up. Yeah, instead of like some of the packaging gets a little tricky because they'll say like, oh, it's multi-grain, and it is different grains, but they're all highly processed grains in there. And when you look at it, the first ingredient says, enriched, refined wheat. So it's not even a whole thing, right off the bat. That number one ingredient isn't whole. So be careful for multi. It's a little bit tricky. And then when we're thinking about, other plant foods like nuts and seeds and beans and lentils, those are more in the category of like protein. So far we've talked about fruits, vegetables, grains. Those are plant-based items that are more carbohydrates. Nuts, seeds, beans, and lentils are plant-based, higher protein sources. And we do know that a lot of people, especially as we get older, we tend to kind of decrease our protein a little bit. Maybe we get a little tired of cooking it. Some people have some dentition issues. Sometimes people have some digestion issues. But we do want to get adequate protein in order to maintain muscle and bone as we're aging. But if more of it can be from really lean sources, like beans and lentils are fantastic because they not only have the protein, they also are high fiber and they're very low calorie. They have almost no fat in them. And then the nuts and seeds, they are higher fat, but it's a heart healthy kind of fat, which is great. And they're very satiating. So they're lovely at like a snack, for example. And then these items have other minerals and vitamins in there, like the calcium and magnesium. It's not just about like the main macronutrient. It's not just about the protein. Okay. The DASH diet does also include dairy in there, and the dairy does couple things for us. One, provide calcium and magnesium just naturally, but then also in the American milk supply, we are fortifying our milk with vitamin D and vitamin A. And we know that, especially where we're at in the Pacific Northwest, we have a really hard time getting adequate vitamin D. So it's one more source of vitamin D. And we do see that with that change, that was a public health initiative, gosh, 100 years now ago, that really impacted the rates of rickets. And so we don't really see those bone malformations, like soft bone issues in kiddos unless they are not drinking your milk. What else? Lean proteins. So there's in the DASH diet across the board, the emphasis is lean proteins. So you're not getting a whole lot of like saturated fat, which is where most of our saturated fat comes from, is in our protein sources, particularly our animal sources. So if you can do more of the beans and lentils, fish and seafood are super lean as well. And the fats that are in there are more heart healthy. Like you get your PUFAs, your omega-3s in fish and seafood, which is great. Poultry without the skin or leaner cuts of red meats. And just watch your portion too, because a little bit goes a long way as far as other nutrients like zinc and iron, for example. Yeah, and I would go with like quality over quantity. A good steak, but in the right portion so you're not overdoing it. Anything with the terms lean or sirloin or round will be leaner than like, so like a sirloin is going to be leaner than a T-bone, for example, or a sirloin is going to be leaner than a ribeye. I actually was just gifted a ribeye recently and it was delicious, but lots of fat in there, right? So I had to kind of like work around that because I don't want all that fat because I have high cholesterol in my family and I'm watching my cholesterol. But it was delicious and it was a treat, something I don't have on a regular basis. And then in the DASH diet, we do want to focus on unsaturated oils. So you can tell an oil is unsaturated because it will be liquid at room temperature. So if it's on the counter sitting there, you can tell that butter is saturated. You can tell that coconut oil is saturated. You can tell that lard and Crisco, they're solid, right? So solid is saturated. Your unsaturated, basically there's kinks in those fatty acid chains. And so they're basically more spread out. And so they're liquid at room temperature. They have a blend of MUFAs and PUFAs. All of our oils are actually blends. We don't really talk about this much, but technically they all have a varying amount of saturated, mono unsaturated, and poly unsaturated. But you've probably heard of olive oil being very heart healthy. That's very high in the mono unsaturated fats. So are peanuts, very high in mono unsaturated fats. Your polyunsaturated fats would be things more like canola oil actually is one of our highest PUFAs. The highest omega-3s are in our canola oil. And other things like avocado, it's great. Grapeseed, yeah. Smell your oils. Make sure that they are not rancid. Don't use old or oxidized oils or nuts and seeds, right? Like don't eat old, rancid smelling nuts and seeds. Anything with those heart healthy fats in there can go rancid over time if they're sitting in a pantry or they're sitting on a warm counter, or if you've got the oil next to the stove and it's getting heated on a regular basis, that's going to go rancid faster. And then once it's oxidized, it's not as heart healthy for you. So you do want to just like throw that out. Like if you start cooking and you smoke your oil, throw it out, start over. It's worth it for your heart health to have really clean and not oxidized fats that you're cooking with. Okay, so with these various changes, and again, it's not one thing, right? It's a whole dietary approach, but we do see significant reduction in blood pressure from a DASH dietary pattern. And then I'll show you a little infographic of how this tends to look. So it's lots and lots of colorful things at the bottom. Lots of plants, fruits, vegetables, and your whole grains. Then your lean meats and dairy, beans, nuts and seeds, heart healthy oils, sweets at the very tippy top. And overall, the other kind of hallmark of a DASH dietary plan is to be limiting your sodium. So it's not just that we're eating, these whole foods, it's also kind of how are they presented? So if you're getting like frozen broccoli in the freezer section, it just says broccoli. It's not broccoli and salt and cheese sauce and MSG and right. And it's not like the whole list of added things that make it taste good. Um, or same thing with canned. Nowadays we have so many options for low or no salt added canned vegetables. There's really no reason to get the salted ones because you can salt to taste at the end. And then also added sugars. So like for our canned fruits, we can nowadays find fruit just in its own juice. Maybe you use the juice for something else. Maybe you use it for a smoothie, or you're making something that needs a little bit of like a mocktail or something, needs a little splash of a flavor. And then you're just having like the fruit itself without any of the added sugars. Okay, the DASH diet tends to be a little bit lower in fat and a little bit higher in dairy than Mediterranean pattern. But Mediterranean pattern is the other diet where we have the most research on this from a heart health perspective. So I'm going to show you that as well. And I like this infographic because it adds physical activity down here at the bottom, like foundational to your pyramid, which makes sense. Most Mediterranean countries and lifestyles include just daily walking to the grocery, walking socially, walking a lot of places, actually a lot of hills. So, up and down. They tend to be more into gardening, like having even a little garden or a little herb garden. So, there's like built-in activity to the day. You'll notice with this infographic, the grains are a little bit more prominent. So think about like, pastas and potatoes, but mostly whole, mostly from the whole sources. And then fruits and vegetables, and including legumes and nuts, a little bit more olive oil, and that tends to be the predominant oil in Mediterranean patterns. Some dairy, and then your animal, fish, poultry, eggs, proteins for the top here. The other difference is a little bit of red wine, typically in moderation, and that is a part of many of the cuisines in the Mediterranean area, which of course includes many different countries. Um, so some of the countries, and cultures don't include any alcohol at all, but most of them do. And I will just mention oh, actually, we have a whole slide on alcohol. We're going to get to that. Okay. Let's think a little bit about your overall colors. So think about today, if you can remember. I know it's been a long day. Um, how many colors have you eaten today? Have you gotten the rainbow? And it's not that you have to get the rainbow every day, but over the course of a week, ideally, you'd be getting the rainbow color from your fruits, your vegetables, your even other things like quinoa, for example, even some of your grains have like, reddish brown colors in there. So think about your week and are you getting the rainbow? All these different phytonutrients, not just represent the vitamins and minerals, but really those chemicals that help us with inflammation and feeding the gut microbiome. So do think about this. Okay. I will also mention, just a little aside, we have some research showing that 30 or more plants per week is associated with healthier gut microbiomes. And you've probably heard in the news that gut microbiome is all the rage right now because we're just realizing how big a part of health and like foundational to the rest of our health it is. So if you can be feeding your gut microbiome, which includes things like, bacteria and yeast, and even things like viruses, if you can be feeding them well and they're doing the work for you, that is such a win. And a lot of times, my patients, just by adding the things they're missing, all of a sudden are having better gut health, better blood pressure, lower cholesterol, better blood sugar. And eventually that also equates to, feeling better, less inflammation, better sleep, weight management, all of these things. But it really does start with like, what are you ingesting? Okay. Here are some key sodium facts from the World Health Organization. We do know that we love our salt, and almost all populations in the world are consuming way too much sodium. The average is over 4,300 milligrams a day of sodium, whereas the WHO recommendation is 2,000 milligrams a day or less. And they do estimate that almost 2 million deaths each year globally are associated with just too much salt, which is just kind of crazy, right? This is one of the most cost-effective measures for improving health and reducing this burden that's not just like, you know, it's affecting us as a personal burden, but it's also affecting our communities as an economic burden, right? Um, to the tune of if we invested $1, and this is talking about US dollars, to scale up sodium reduction interventions, the return on that investment, the estimate is $12 in reduction of, disease burden, medications, visits to the ER, visits to the doctor. These things really add up. So I would definitely, do a little sodium analysis. So have you looked at labels? Are you looking at sodium, that line in the nutrition facts panel? How often are you eating out? Typically, the most of our salt is coming from either packaged foods or eating out. So if you're eating out quite a bit, that's going to raise your intake just naturally. They want to make the food taste good, right? So they're going to add a lot of salt. I would add up a day, see where you're at. You could use an app like MyFitnessPal or Chronometer or any of those, apps that have free programs to just see what a day looks like, or just start adding up if you have nutrition facts panels, then that thing has been somewhat processed, right? And so you'll get a sodium line. And that amount is for one serving. So if the package has 4 servings and you eat the whole package, you got to times that sodium amount by 4, right? So I would add up a day and just see where you're at. Here's some strategies for, reducing your intake. Ideally, mostly fresh, minimally processed. That doesn't mean like you don't take advantage of like semi-prepped. Like, sure, get the broccoli florets. It's still just broccoli, right? It's already cut for you, it's washed, ready to go. Fantastic. They haven't added anything to it. So, that's amazing. If you can cut your habit of using the salt shaker and really taste your food first, some people don't even do that. They just like shake it on without even tasting the food. Taste it first. You might not need it. Um, Start cooking with little or no added salt at the beginning. A lot of recipes call for that like starting salt, right? Like you sprinkle it on the onions or your mirepoix, like your onions, carrots, celery, to kind of like reduce and help with the moisture coming out of those vegetables. You honestly don't need that. You don't need that salt, and you're also not going to taste it very well because it's going to be in the food instead of on the food. So ideally, just skip that starting salt and only do salt to taste at the end. But I would add a lot of other things, spices, herbs, citrus is a good one. Anything that's like adding color, adding those antioxidants, adding a lot of flavor, but not adding the sodium. You can replace your regular table salt with a lower salt version or like a salt substitute version. Usually those are potassium chloride based, And the caveat with this is if you are on a medication that causes your kidneys to basically hold on to potassium more, those are not recommended because you could have high potassium in your blood, which would be not a good thing. So, if you have any question about that, you can talk to your doctor, your pharmacist, or even like look it up. Like, does my medication cause me to retain more potassium? Then these salt substitutes would not be recommended. Um, okay. Limit the use of commercial sauces, dressings, and instant products. So I know it's super easy just to use the dressing off the shelf, but I will say that homemade dressing is cheap, delicious, and infinitely changeable, right? Like you get to put in different herbs, different spices, different oils, different acids to make your own blend of things. Um, and you control the salt. So that's a way to save some money, save some sodium, and have some fun with, the toppings that you're putting on your food. Limit the consumption of processed foods. 70% of our sodium is from packaged and prepared items. That's a lot of sodium. So even if we're just getting, away from processed, that's a huge, huge shift. And then if it is processed, a lot of times these days we have these options for the lower salt. So stand back at the grocery store, scan that aisle looking for no salt added or for the reduced sodium versions. They're probably available. They might be like higher or lower than you're looking, like if you're looking right at eye level. So look up, look down. Sometimes they're even cheaper. It's fun. Okay, we do want to be having lots of flavor though, lots of fun with our food, deliciousness in our food. I will send you with these slides, I'll send you a little handout on spices. Probably most of you have some spices that you haven't used in a while. Sometimes it's just a matter of getting them out. Put them on the counter, see them, look up recipes or look up how to use them. Start playing around with your spices because you're adding a lot of flavor and interest without the salt, but also you're adding those other things like micronutrients and the phytonutrients in there. And then if you can't have an herb garden, chives do really well here. Also rosemary and sage and oregano and thyme. They come back every year in my garden. So if you plant them once, they'll just keep giving. And then you have fresh herbs to add to your meals. Okay. So the recommendation on alcohol intake is to not start if you are not already imbibing. Um, do you know that alcohol, like ethanol itself, is very high in calories? It's almost as calorie dense as fat. So if you think about like a glass of wine, pouring like olive oil into a glass of wine, it's almost like that. It's 7 calories per gram. Fat is 9 calories per gram. Protein and carbs are only 4. So alcohol is almost double the amount of calories compared to your carbs and protein per gram. So be really careful with that because a lot of us, can easily overdo the alcohol, especially with the glasses. The glasses have gotten so huge these days. It's easy for me to take like a whole can of LaCroix or sparkling whatever and pour it into a wine glass. Like my wine glasses are that big that it will fit it and it'll fit a splash of cranberry juice on top of that. So, if you're doing a pour halfway, that's at least 6 ounces, probably more. What is considered a serving? So a pint of beer, so 12-ounce pint of beer, 5-ounce glass of wine, not 6 to 8, and then a long shot or 1.5 ounces of distilled spirits. So check your serving size. And the recommendation, well, the dietary guidelines have actually just changed. Now they're just saying like be careful with it, but they have not put a limit on it. In the past, with the previous dietary guidelines, the recommendations were for No more than 1 drink for women and no more than 2 drinks for men per day. Okay. And this can reduce your blood pressure with not overdoing it on alcohol. All righty. So all of these things are going to be adding up. So we've got, maybe a little bit of weight loss. Maybe you switch to more of a DASH dietary pattern. You start doing some more physical activity. You start limiting your sodium. You limit the alcohol intake. If you add all of these things up, like if you started doing all of these things together, that's about as good as our medications, actually. So, these changes add up and they add up over time. So you need to give yourself some time. You need to give yourself flexibility and work towards changes, not trying to do everything all at once and also not trying to be perfect with it, right? Because that's when people throw in the towel and give up and go back to their old ways. You got to take the baby steps to really make long-term changes. Okay, so speaking of that, there are some, really great books out there on behavior change. If you're feeling like this is the rub for you, like you're motivated, you've got the information, but then like the follow through and like really changing that behavior is the thing that's getting in the way. There are some great books like Habit Stacking or Atomic Habits or Tiny Habits. And here are some of the strategies from these books. So behavior is equal to motivation plus ability plus a prompt. So if you think about all three of these things, first of all, you have to be kind of motivated towards it. If you're not at all motivated, you're not going to do it, right? Like if you don't want to do it or you don't want the outcome from doing it, then you're not going to do it. If it's beyond your ability, of course, that's not going to happen. It's got to be realistic. And then you have to have something that prompts you to do it. It's either, a deadline or it's on the to-do list or it's an accountability partner that you walk with. Like something is prompting you. So you got to put those three elements together to really get the outcome. Get yourself to do it. Another recipe for success, this one I believe is from Tiny Habits. You have an anchor moment. So after I blank, I will blank. Actually, I think this is Atomic Habits. This is James Clear. So, you have like after I walk in the door and hang my keys up, I will do 5 jumping jacks. And then I will high five my husband and say, "Hey, I'm home and I did my jumping jacks." Or whatever it is. Like you can make it silly or you can make it serious if you're more of a serious person. But have a thing that like is the prompt and then you either do your behavior right before or even right after, right? So I kind of like the before better. Like before I walk out the door, I will grab my phone, keys, and wallet. It's that kind of thing where you make it so habitual, that you have to do those things before you leave the house. Same thing with all these tiny behaviors that you're trying to shift. And then do celebrate because the celebration actually makes a difference in how long you're going to stick with this and, keep coming back to it. Because perseverance is half of the battle. All right, and check out some of these books. Atomic Habits by James Clear is really nice on audio book. You can get through it pretty quickly. Okie dokie. Diane is asking, how long should the strength resistance exercises be? That's a good question. There really isn't like a set number of minutes on it, like with the moderate and intense cardio, because usually people kind of like take breaks in between the sets and the reps. Usually a set incorporates like 8 to 15 reps of whatever you're doing. And you want to do that, a few, like a handful of times, and think about all of your different body parts. But if you were just starting out, I would actually like think about maybe getting a one-time personal trainer. Like if you have a YMCA membership or you have a gym membership and they have a trainer, a lot of times they'll include that one-time personal trainer session to give you some ideas and talk you through just a starting place. Um, I can also send you a little handout on this. I'll look through our handouts and see what would be appropriate for like starting a strength exercise routine. Because yeah, you don't want to overdo it. And you don't want to have an injury. So sometimes that personal trainer is really nice just even for the ergonomics of how to do these things appropriately. Or if you have, things going on where you need like the next level, like a physical therapist, your physical therapist could also be a great person to ask for like an exercise routine for at home to give you some, at home exercises or at the gym exercises. Okay. We're taking a big picture perspective with all of this, cardiovascular issues, they take a long time to accumulate. It's decades and decades that these things add up. And the same thing with positive health behaviors. They add up for the long term. So you can make little changes now that are going to impact your future. And I would think about just one or two, like pick, the things that are really, really standing out to you. Don't try and do too much at once. Write them down, be very specific, put it somewhere you can see it, sticky note on the mirror or whatever. Talk about it, tell a friend, set a deadline. And then it's not just like that goal, but you got to back up from, what that thing is to how do you get to even start there, right? Like if it's getting to the gym, well, you've got to get a membership and get your shoes and, look at the schedule and, all of those things. So sometimes it's the action plan of, the steps you need to take in order to start the behavior. You might need to back up that far. Okie dokie. Here are some resources for you. Heart.org, that's the American Heart Association website. They've got a healthy living link and they've got actually a bunch of recipes if you're looking for recipes. Definitely your own physician, get your checkup, be talking with your physician about your blood pressure if things are changing, or, if you're on blood pressure medications and you're starting to make some of these changes we talked about tonight, just be on the alert. Think about getting a personal trainer once or, for that ongoing support. If the behavior side of things is something that you think is a piece of the puzzle for you, could be like depression, it could be ADHD, could be trauma, whatever's going on that's kind of a barrier. Counselor, psychologist, psychiatrist, it'd be nice to address those things and work through them, not just try and like work around or sweeping them under the rug, because at some point like the rug gets too full and we just can't ignore it anymore, so we got to like address the thing. You can also meet with a registered dietitian nutritionist to have more individualized especially dietary support. And along those lines, I will be at Stilly Valley Health for our three-part preventing diabetes series. That actually starts later this month in February. I'll be on site in person. So if you want to come and join that, that would be great. And we also have monthly cooking demonstrations in the teaching kitchen there at Stilly Valley in Smoky Point. And it's either myself or one of my other dietitians, like Anka is there often, or maybe Kelsey. And you can come sample food and get some tastes of healthy cooking and some more ideas, get inspired. And then we also have health coaching through Stilly Valley for participants who don't have any nutrition coverage as part of their insurance benefits, which these days a lot of insurance plans are covering nutrition counseling. So yours probably does. But if it doesn't, and you are in the area, in the zip code area of Stilly Valley, they also offer health coaching through our dietitians. Um, for, working on these behavior changes to be supporting your health. All right, and then here's a couple of my favorite cookbooks that are on my shelf here for thinking about your heart health. Reducing High Blood Pressure for Beginners and Mediterranean Table. These have been out, both of them, for a while now, so you should be able to find them pretty cheap, used, and they've got delicious recipes in there. All righty. I don't see any other questions in the chat, and we're right at 7 o'clock. So thank you so much for your time, your attention, for thinking not just about your heart health, but you are an impact on the people around you as well. And you will get the slides, the recording, and any other little handouts that I send along with that. And I just wish you the best with your heart health this month and into the future. Maybe I will see you at a future class. All right, take care, everybody.